how did it all begin?
I wanted to do a service that was different from what we were doing, right? And then one day, I'll never forget this. I was sitting in the chapel, and I'm sitting forward, and we're all sitting forward, and I realized nobody ever looks at each other's faces at services.
He said to me, I remember this so clearly, I've got this idea for a new kind of a service that I want us to do. And it's gonna be in the round.
So everyone could see each other, because if you see someone singing, that's gonna make you want to sing.
And it was gonna be only with Jonathan playing the guitar.
And we weren't on a pedestal, we weren't on a bema, we were on the floor. We're no different than any of the other congregants.
I could tell that this was something that was potentially going to change the way that we all experience prayer as a congregation.
Well, what do we want this service to be like? For me, it was actually a combination of two things. One, camp. Camp Eisner has this incredible library that has ceilings as high as in this sanctuary. Had books all over the walls, and we would do Havdalah in that space, and we would always sit in a circle to do that. And I'll never forget this one moment where we're all singing together. I just remember my entire body got chills from the sound of everybody singing together and looking at each other and the feeling. And I'm like, how can we grab that feeling? And then the other one was my first year in rabbinical school in Jerusalem. Rabbi Levi Kelman at a synagogue called Neshama. Everyone is sitting shoulder to shoulder, facing each other, facing away from each other, like wherever you could grab a seat. And the entire service was song after song after song. Those two experiences, I kind of felt, how can we bring those experiences here?
He goes, Yonah, there's not going to be any cantorial singing in this.
And I wanted the service to feel like it was a series of breaths. And you go through a section of the service, you're done with that section, and then another one starts up and it brings you to another place, and then you come back down from that place. And then you end up going to another place, and that the service is basically the musicians together bringing people through an experience of prayer and music that has various levels to it.
And together, we started coming up with musical ideas for what would be the music that would draw people in and make people really feel a sense of connection and give people a sound in their hearts that was different than anything that they had ever experienced in the service before.
We originally called it the Shabbat Experience. So we do the first one, and we were all excited, and this guy comes up.
He said, you know, this kind of reminds me of MTV Unplugged, but for Shabbat. And Jonathan and I looked at each other, and we both kind of went, boing? Unplugged, but for Shabbat.
Shabbat Unplugged!
And the rest, they say, is history.
Originally, when we did this, of course, it was just me and Cantor Kliger.
You know what the rhythm was? It was me sitting at the table, pounding on the table. And then one day I was like, Jonathan, my fingers are killing me. I think we gotta find someone to play the drums.
Jonathan was visiting me at my parents' house, and we were doing a big Shabbat. And after Shabbat, we were just jamming and playing music like we usually do. And Jonathan looked at me and goes like, we're looking for a drummer.
He goes, sure, you know, he shows up barefoot and with his djembe, and he just had this amazing energy.
I could feel that the drum added something extra, and for me, it was something to share that was connected deeper to my roots.
And then we also had Elizabeth Yaron, who would come in and play flute, who was a good friend of ours. In 2003, all of a sudden, this guy shows up.
My sister was living in LA at the time, and she was so excited to tell me about this service. She said, Zach, you gotta go to the service and bring your clarinet. It's basically like this huge jam session.
This guy comes up, whispers something to Amir. Amir's like, oh yeah, yeah. He goes away, comes back with a little clarinet stand. I'm like, clarinet stand? This guy must be pretty good. Amir's friend, right?
They were just getting down, and the music was so good, and there were hundreds of people surrounding them, and I thought, this is it.
He starts playing, and we're all like, wow, this guy's amazing. It's like this jazz, klezmer vibe. It's so good. It's so great. After the service, I go up to Amir. I'm like, Amir, I'm so glad your friend came. That's amazing. He goes, I'd never met that guy in my life. I'm like, what do you mean? So, Zack came and played with us. None of us knew him. He showed up with his clarinet, and he's been with us ever since. All of a sudden, we found Ava.
I am personally not Jewish. I don't know if a lot of people know that. I'm Egyptian Lebanese, but I'm not Jewish. And when I was told about this gig, I was nervous.
She brings this soul that just added to our souls.
It was just like a band that clicked naturally. This was the same thing.
Judd Abrams came and played with us.
The style of music that they played was Bob Dylan meets Moses, and that really spoke to my heart.
Daniel Brenner was our intern, and he was an exceptional musician. We had Josh Goldberg, who was a part of the team.
What I remember is all the attendees and everyone singing, but there was, of course, Lizzie right here in front, and the harmonies and the song that came out of her.
You know, everybody speaks about how Shabbat Unplugged is an opportunity to be a part of this communal voice. And yes, I was able to be a part of this communal voice, but I always felt special when I was there. I was able to sit, and if I wanted to close my eyes, I could. And if I wanted to sing out, sometimes a mic was shoved in my face.
I was like, all right, she's got something.
What really needs to be said is that I have been incredibly fortunate to work with two cantors in my 25 years that have embraced music from a rabbi and actually been a partner in working on these services. And I would say, you know, the service may have begun as a kernel in my mind, but once it started, it belonged to me and Yonah. And then as it's continued, it belongs to me and Lizzie.
That sound of the whole congregation singing together at the top of their hearts, the top of their voices, all with one purpose, like the sound filling the prayer space, is something that really, really is a very, very special thing about that service.
And there have been many days, many, where you're at the end of the week, exhausted, have a little bit of a headache, and we sit down, start singing a nigun, start singing the prayers, and we get to that crazy moment at the end where we're all going nuts, and my 5-year-old is standing on the chair next to me, dancing and screaming to Adon Olam. And after it's done, you just feel this incredible amount of energy so you can go into the rest of your week.